So here in Galatians chapter 2, Paul recounts the story uh, of when Peter, uh, when he was at Antioch, he was eating with the Gentiles, and then some Jews from Jerusalem showed up, certain from James, and but when they showed up, Peter separated himself from the Gentiles and quit eating with them. Uh, or according to the Bible, it said that Peter was fearing them, which were of the circumcision. Okay, and then other Jews started to follow Peter's bad decision, even Barnabas, right? And then in verse 14, Paul says, "But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel." Okay. And then he rebukes Peter. And down here in verse 16, it says, "Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law, for by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified." Now, this is an interesting story, especially in the beginning of verse 14, because Paul said that they didn't walk uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. And Paul was saying this about guys like Barnabas and Peter, Peter was an apostle, right? And they really should have known better, but they were not walking uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. Now, there are believers nowadays who also do not walk uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, because they're afraid of legalists, and they're seeking to be justified in the eyes of those legalists. But the truth of the gospel is that it's God that justifies. Okay? It's not people. And also this wonderful verse in verse 16, it says it over and over again, that it's by faith in Christ, and it's not by being justified by the law, that you can't be justified. No flesh is going to be justified by the works of the law. And there's a lot of people that like, if they go out and evangelize somebody, they might use this verse. They might even have it highlighted in their Bible, and they'll open it up and show people this verse. And they might even show this verse: "I do not frustrate the grace of God, for if righteousness come by the law, then Christ is dead in vain." That's Galatians 2:21. They'll do that to preach the gospel, right? And then, like, if they're able to win somebody to Christ, they pretty much immediately tell them to get to work now. It's ridiculous. And they fall for the same mistake that the Galatians fell for. And, also in a lot of churches, there's all sorts of ways that they try to get you to not walk uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. One of them is an altar call, where, the pastor tells you that you have to come up there and do your business with the Lord and get right with God or whatever, where, that totally negates the gospel. As in, obviously you can't lose your salvation, but if you tell a believer that he needs to get right with God, you're basically saying that the gospel's not enough, and that what God hath cleansed, you're basically calling common and unclean and stuff. And here, even Peter, before he was eating with the Gentiles, because he realized that God's able to save them too, and these Gentiles believe the gospel. And then these religious Jews from Jerusalem show up, these legalists, and Peter somehow thought that, oh man, this is like really embarrassing, me eating with the Gentiles, and this doesn't seem holy or whatever. So he was shrinking back and not walking uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. And he did that as a saved man. We shouldn't do that. The truth of the gospel is that Jesus Christ justifies the ungodly, and he saves to the uttermost. And what God called clean, you're not going to say that it's unclean, right? And nowadays, maybe it's not Jews, shrinking back from Gentiles, but nowadays it's like altar calls. It's how you dress. It's like, if there's some guy in shorts and a neck tattoo, you're not going to want him in church because you think he's like less holy or something, even though he believed the gospel. That's ridiculous. It's people with, a bunch of piercings that like religious people don't want to be around, even though they believe the gospel. It's like people with like dyed hairs and, or people who don't wear a suit to go to church, and then the others look down upon them and kind of pretend they don't exist during the service, like, But look, or even in some more extreme cases, it's like dieting or whatever, what you eat. But all those things, that doesn't justify. What justifies you is Jesus Christ. And walking uprightly according to the truth of the gospel means accepting the fact that Jesus Christ is able to save sinners to the uttermost, and that in Christ, we're all equal. Like we all have the righteousness of God imputed onto our account, and God didn't give certain believers more of his righteousness than others. Okay. The doctrine of imputation is applied to every believer equally. And look, for by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. So it really doesn't matter what men think of you for justification. Like it matters whether or not you believe the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's why the just shall live by faith. Because you didn't receive the Spirit by works, you received it by faith, by the hearing of faith. And the law can only condemn you and turn you into a hypocrite and separate you from other believers. And it creates this ridiculous hierarchy that should not be there, because there's people deluded into thinking they keep the law more than others or whatever. But if you've broken at one point, you're guilty of all. So the law is an administration of condemnation, it's administration of death. So remember that, don't frustrate the grace of God, for if righteousness come by the law, then Christ is dead in vain. And, please walk uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. You know, don't do Peter's mistake where you would be intimidated by, so-called religious people and legalists and stuff into basically negating the truths of the gospel. Watch out.